a retired special ambassador, was a senior advisor to former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. I've worked with him on projects with the Israel Policy Forum, which we're actually going to have a session with them next week on a different topic. But Nimrod, it's great to see you on the screen, and it's always wonderful to talk to you all. I want to start the discussion where I like to start discussion, which is on the people, and the people first of Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza. And Omar, I receive many text messages, a lot of information from you on an ongoing basis that help me stay informed, I think. Can you tell us all, just to start out, where the situation is, the human security situation for the millions of people living in Gaza? Not only your family, but what's the basic situation before we get into the negotiations and how we might end this war?
First of all, thank you, Brian, for inviting me, and I'm very honored to be with you and with Nimrod, and to allow us to discuss and to explain our position for the benefit of everybody. I am in Cairo. I exit Gaza in first week of the war. My family, my wife, my two sons are out, but my sister and my brother, my extended family are there. It's a very personal thing, but it's also much bigger. It handled everything. Now, I don't want to talk more, but we need to be very frank and straightforward. What we have been seeing in Gaza for the past 18 years, and especially for the past 2 years, is the result of the short vision policies and for the past mistakes. We are harvesting, both of us, the Israeli and the Palestinian, are harvesting the short vision mistake. Now, Gaza is 2.2 million people. 62% of them are young people who are under 30 years old. They have never been outside Gaza. 2/3 of the Gazan youth have never been outside due to the blockade that was imposed in Gaza in 2007. Now, the whole population have been displaced. Gaza is a very, very small place. It's in the media all the time, but people need to know that it's only 362 kilometers square, 200 square mile, inhabited by 2.2 million people, one of the highest populated area on the globe. Majority of them are young people. All the Gaza people now are squeezed to some 20% of the Gaza. No more Rafah, no more Khan Yunis, no more in the north. There are three big gatherings now. One is in the western of Gaza City, close to the beach. One in the middle area, Del Balah, where is my family and where I was born and live all my life. And the second one is in Al Mawasi, which is between Khan Yunis and Del Balah, which was former settlement area before the Israeli disengaged from Gaza in 2005. There are many challenges after 21 months of the war. Starvation is the main issue. Women are losing their life. They are losing their babies. There is no food. There is no water. There is no single electricity was allowed into Gaza since the 7th of October. Water is very rare. There is no cash. There is no cash. And if I send $1,000 online banking from here to my sister in Gaza, she cash it with 50% discounted. We can talk about it later. So there's a problem of cash. Cash become a commodity. Is not anymore a mediator between buyer and seller. So it becomes a commodity. And there are people who are very few people, like any crisis everywhere, they are making millions of dollars out of the Gaza crisis. And this network of those who make benefit, it's in Gaza, Hebron, Ramallah, Israel, and sometimes, and most of the time, also some Palestinians who live in Cairo. The people in Gaza have expressed their opinion. I will close here. Have expressed their opinion so many times under the war. They went out in the protesting, asking the war to end, asking Hamas to get out. And you have seen many protests in the north and the middle of Gaza under the war, requesting to extend the war, to stop the war, to release the hostages, and to stop the war and to go into the deal. There's a lot of anger now going on the negotiating team in Doha.
Yeah.
Why they did not go for that? Although Palestinians are smart enough to know that Netanyahu is not interested in reaching a ceasefire. There were so many proposals. There were maintaining point where the ceasefire was reachable, but it seemed that the Israeli government I'm not saying the Israeli people, the Israeli government are not interested in reaching the ceasefire. The
Yeah.
situation is beyond imagination. There is no food. People are starving to go find food, and I will close the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. 600 people have lost their life while they were going to take some food, and 3,000 were injured. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Omar. Let me follow up before I turn to Nimrod, maybe on two quick questions. One is where you just left off, which are the mechanisms for trying to deliver food and essential aid to Palestinians. Now, of course, there's been a lot of news about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And just to review for the entire audience, when the Trump administration came into office in January, there was a ceasefire in place that was executed by both the Biden administration in cooperation with the Trump administration. And that held until about mid-March. And when phase two of that ceasefire was to arrive, the Israelis decided not to stick with that ceasefire and had different terms and reinitiated the military operations, but also imposed a siege, in a sense, on a lot of the aid that was delivered there. So, and I think it was a means to try to pressure Hamas in the negotiations. What is your take now that there have been these mechanisms like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? There are still other deliverers of aid. Much of it may not be getting in. What's your take on the current situation and whether that's a point of contention in the negotiations that are taking place in Doha?
In brief, there are three types of aid going to Gaza now. One is through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is not humanitarian at all. It becomes a trap for death. Second, through some international organization, UNICEF, Oxfam, Honorable World Food Program, that are allowed into Gaza in a very little capacities. And third, some commercial product from the West Bank, from Israel, that needs coordination with the Israelis. Of course, everything needs a coordination with Israel because Israel control the land and the sea, and it's a war zone. So nothing can be allowed into Gaza without this. But the quantity of aid that goes to Gaza is too little. Gaza has 2.2 million people. Before the siege, before the blockade, the average there were 800 trucks per day. I'm sure Nimrod remembers this. During the nice time, there were 800 to 1,000 trucks from Israel, and from Israel only, from West Bank, coming to Gaza every day, and there was export. Now you talk about 50 trucks a day after period of nothing allowed on. Still, there is very severe shortage. Second, the situation, the war creates some black market. Can you imagine the 1 kilo sugar in Gaza is sold by 300 shekel? Can you imagine one chicken is sold with 400 shekel, $100 for a people who are totally poor, no income, the unemployment is very high. Now we should ask who's benefiting from this and who's controlling the whole situation. But at the end of the day, decision maker in America, in White House, in Israel, in Tel Aviv should understand the people are the punished because the people don't have any tool either to fight or to control or to go. They don't have cash to take transportation from Gaza to Rafah, which is 20 kilometers. So who has the upper hand? You need to know. People are punished, especially the women. I'm writing a paper about handicap. Can you
Yeah.
imagine how difficult for a handicapped, somebody with disability who lost her parents or her parents, a woman or a lady or a girl, to go to Rafah to take some food and to carry the sack of wheat, which killed 20 kilometers back for 20 kilometers, and she has to be 200 to 300 shekel if she can find a transportation. The crisis is beyond our imagination, and the normal people, the extraordinary people, the innocent people are paying the price.
Yeah. So Omar, just very briefly, one last question before I turn to Nimrod. What's your understanding of the status of the negotiations? And I know that I mentioned Doha negotiations. As we were talking yesterday, there's a parallel discussion going on in Cairo. What's your best take on what's going on in those negotiating rooms, and how close are they to a deal?
We have been hearing some positive news, and sometimes we go down ups and downs. There is an assessment by the Palestinian that the negotiating team in Doha always comes late, and always don't they give Netanyahu excuses to say no. Now they are discussing the map that was rejected 2 weeks ago. Now they are talking that they want to go back to the Witkoff plan in January, Witkoff plan in May. They need to be more smarter to understand that this government, Israel, is not interested in ceasefire, and so they should withdraw all the excuses. I have asked this, I have conveyed this message, not only me, but a couple of hundred Palestinian observers. The problem, we have three problems here. We'll close. One, the negotiating is only from the movement of Hamas. There is no Palestinian team. The negotiating, the negotiator, they don't have the technical capacity. They don't have the experience. Negotiation is a skills and knowledge. Nobody is not anyone who can negotiate a deal. Nimrod can talk about this much better than me. Third, there is no consultation with outside the circle of the movement, and you will never be doing good job as long as you don't hear yourself. Third, of course, there is no enough pressure by the key actors, by America, by the Israeli public, by the regional factors like Egypt and Saudi and Israel to stop the war.
Great. Thanks, Omar. And Nimrod, I want to turn to you, and thanks for being patient. I wanted to cover the landscape briefly on what's going on the Palestinian side, especially Gaza. Maybe building off of what Omar just said there, and he mentioned the Israeli public, and that's where I'd like to start is, can you help describe to us what it's like in Israel now 21 months after the October 7th attacks? Where are we? What's the mood? And then move towards more how you see the current Israeli government, whether you agree or disagree with Omar's argument that this current government is not interested in a ceasefire, the one in Israel.
Thanks, Brian. I cannot start talking about the Israeli public and the other issues important issues that you raised by ignoring everything that Omar just said. And I have to say something about that, because there's no day in August, sorry, no hour that I'm not ashamed of what is being done in Gaza in my name. That was not the case on October 7th, 8th, or 9th. And that was not the case in the ensuing several months. The brutality of October 7th demanded a very harsh response, and the two objectives set by the government were the right ones. Bring all hostages back and make sure that Hamas governance and military formations are no longer there. Those objectives were accomplished over a year ago. And I must say that I'm not surprised that this is now the sentiment in the general public, coming to your question.
Mm-hmm.
The country today, across the board, is divided. Most pollsters will tell you 70-30. 70% it is the liberal Democrats, and 30% are not. And then you go deeper into the issues. And we just had 3 days ago, there was another major poll by one of the leading media posters. And the question was, are you for ending the war and bringing the hostages? Oh, they even phrased it more dramatically. Bringing the hostages home, even if it means ending the war, or not. And the results were 74-8. With the remainder, don't know. The more perhaps troubling finding is something that I never thought that I would see in my lifetime. And that is when the public is being asked about what motivates the prime minister. You asked about the Israeli government, you can ask about the Israeli coalition. Neither is important. We have one decision maker in the country, all powerful, and that's the prime minister. He maneuvered his political environment over the last 20 years to the point where nobody challenges him from within his party and few within the coalition. And we have one decision maker, and when the public, by a substantial majority, believes that what drives the prime minister are his political, personal considerations rather than national security ones in conducting a war. Now, that is beyond troubling in a democratic society. So that's the picture inside the country. We are now in the midst of yet another coalition crisis, long predicted, on an issue that has nothing to do with Gaza.
Yeah.
A domestic issue that where his coalition partners are split over the issue of exempting ultra-Orthodox from military service. At the time that the armed forces are stretched to the limit, and today they have another front to deal with, which is Syria, with the Druze situation there.
Yeah.
So over the past 24 hours, a couple of parties left the coalition. Tonight, a third one is going to make, two more are going to make a decision where they do or do not jump ship. But either way, they are leaving the coalition, leaving it as a minority government, but they are not out to vote it out of office.
So, and Nimrod, just to remind us, the timeline is that the Knesset recess is on, is it July 27th? Is that correct?
That is correct, and all the way to late October.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're talking about, and I think it is relevant to our discussion, when the Prime Minister dragged his feet on ceasefire, and here I share the majority opinion for political, personal considerations, violated the initial ceasefire imposed by Trump, cooked by Biden, and making difficulties on the road for negotiations that Omar described, coming into the negotiations a few days ago with a map that everybody knew was unacceptable. And now suddenly he is flexible and making concessions on a map that we all knew was unacceptable. He's a master of shaping his excuses in terms that sounds reasonable to his base.
Uh-huh.
And we're seeing it time and time again. Now, where are we now on this issue? There are three pauses that formulate his timeline. One that you mentioned, the Knesset leaves on recess, and therefore it's very, very difficult, almost impossible, to bring him down during this very long summer recess. The second one, the court is going on an equally long summer recess, and he doesn't have to stand up in court twice a week and answer for the cross-examination that exposes so many lies and headlines against him, which tarnish his image even further. And the third one is the 60-day ceasefire that is being discussed.
Yeah.
So if he left Washington a week ago without a deal because it was premature, because the Knesset was not out yet, and and the hardliners in his coalition could have reacted by bringing him down, we are approaching the moment that that can no longer happen, and therefore, in my judgment, he will go for the 60-day ceasefire. And given his second masterful trait of postponing decisions to the last minute, I think that with these three pauses coinciding, his decision of whether to make the ceasefire permanent or resume the fighting will be made on day 59 of the ceasefire. So we're going to grind water during the 60 days until he assesses his standing in the polls, the strategies of his opponents in Israeli politics, before he makes a decision where he's breaking to the center for elections, or sticks with his hard line because he wants to postpone elections.
So Nimrod, you're describing a leader who actually is putting tactical political considerations in his own survival ahead of other priorities for the country. That's your view, correct?
Yes. Look, those in your audience who have not watched the Bibi Files, I strongly recommend, but that's where it was all laid out bare. We're talking about the second Netanyahu incarnation. The first Netanyahu was a patriot. I knew him well. We worked sort of together when I was in the prime minister's office and he was ambassador to the UN. He was a patriot. I disagreed with him on everything, but he was a patriot. With his indictment and trial, narcissism, self-centered, personal interests overshadow all else.
So, Nimrod, I know you do a lot of work, analytic work still to this day, and I've benefited from it, aimed at trying to help the Israeli security establishment, organizations like Kogat and others, to plan for the future. I thought before I turn back to Omar with some additional questions, maybe you could tell us what's your best description of what the current Israeli plan for Gaza is. We see things in the news about moving people to different parts of Gaza, maybe also thoughts that different mechanisms are aimed at trying to push Palestinians out of Gaza completely. What's your best description of where things are in terms of the Israeli establishment, the institutions, in terms of what they'd like to see happen, away from what you just said about your view on the current leader, Netanyahu?
The guidance from the political echelon to the security establishment is to create what they call a humanitarian camp in southern Gaza for 600,000, initially for 600,000 Gazans who would be able to enter, to be vetted and enter, with exit only from Gaza to Egypt, not back to Gaza or Israel. The Israeli security establishment believe that this is an awful idea. We are a democracy. They will do what the political echelon instructs, so they are planning for that. But they know that this is just as much, it is an even bigger disaster than the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that you alluded to and Omar mentioned, that became a trap for those hungry people starving for some humanitarian assistance. That will be even worse. And I've seen in the Israeli media commentators talking about it not as a humanitarian camp, but as a concentration camp, God forbid. So no, nobody intends to exterminate anybody. But that's against Israeli law, against international law, and against the best judgment of the security establishment that passes no political judgment, just on the basis of practicality. They believe that it is not doable, and it will be counterproductive, and it will backfire in our faces on issues of security and international humanitarian concerns.
Great. So I want to try to move the discussion towards the overall question of the panel, which is how to end this war and where do we go from here, essentially. We're also getting some terrific questions from the audience about a number of topics, including Egypt's role in sending humanitarian aid and opening the border, perhaps. There's also discussions, which I think will try to avoid the big news of the day, which is what's going on in Syria, just because we do want to stay focused on the challenge in Gaza, though it does have an opportunity cost to note all of that. But I want to turn back to you, Omar, because you mentioned a couple of really interesting things. You mentioned that what you called short vision, the absence of a long-term vision, is a key part of it. I would also argue, in my assessment, the absence of leaders who actually truly leading their people and listening to their people. That's absent from the scene in many different ways. We have one question about the possible future of Hamas and its role, but I thought I'd wrap it into a broader question, because you've analyzed Palestinian politics for years. You mentioned briefly that I think you said the Palestinian Authority, they're not part of these discussions, or on the sidelines. Could you characterize for us where the PA is, and then also what you think sort of the trajectory of Hamas as a not just just as a political movement inside of Gaza, because you mentioned that they have strong disapproval, but give us a snapshot on where Palestinian politics are and how this might feed into a long-term ceasefire.
Thank you very much again, and thank you, Nimrod. And I have seen some of the question placed by the audience. I will make myself short. First of all, we need to remember that Gaza is a Mediterranean city, is one of the oldest cities in the globe, 5,000 years. Gaza used to be a very nice, vibrant, prosperous place. Gaza used to export carnation, herbs to Washington, to America, to the United States, and textile to Israel. If you ask an elderly Israeli, much older than Nimrod, ask him about him or her about
Nobody's
Gaza,
older
he
than
will
me.
tell you about how Gaza was nice in terms of fish restaurant. Gaza used to be a very, very nice place. The Israeli siege was put in Gaza in 2007 in the excuse that Hamas took over, pushed Gaza back, and pushed Gaza to be a very poor place, close. 37% of the Gazan population were born under the siege. We are growing by 5%. We are one of very productive in this. So 37% of the Gaza population, of the 2 million people, were born under the siege. Another 37% were become adult under the siege. So you talk about 2/3 of a society who either born or become a grown adult under siege, have never been outside. They have never been outside because whomever want to leave must have a permit from Israel. I am 62 years old. I lived all my life in Gaza. I love Gaza. I want to answer to the other question. I'm Palestinian. I'm very proud. I'm the brother of Jesus. Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem. We were able to go everywhere. The Palestinian accept the two-state solution. Approved. I was so happy in 1994 because I'm Gazan, born in Gaza. My family was a refugee, but I'm born in Gaza. So we're so happy to have peace agreement with Israel. And I felt very sad. I'm not here to please anybody. When Ishaq Rabin was assassinated, because he was very serious. He was very serious about making with the Palestinian. I met with Shimon Peres. I met with his colleague, and he, one of the Israeli leader that we missed today, because he said, Shimon Peres said, we want our neighbor to be rich. We want our neighbor to be prosper. And there is a huge economic potential and interest potential between the Palestinian and the Israelis. And there were 100,000, 20 Palestinian work from Gaza to go to Israel every day. We learn technology. We used to have export carnation, the best flower. I will go back to the question. So we need to remember what Gaza was. I published an article last year in Europublic about Gaza, how it was, and my dream that Gaza will be back. And I don't want to go to Egypt because I'm Palestinian. For a simple reason that why you want us to move from Gaza to Egypt? Egypt is our brother. We are close to Egypt, but I want to go back to my family, to my land, to my culture. We are Arab, but I'm Palestinian first of all. So we need to go to the root of the problem is the two-state solution. BA, Palestinian Authority, has a three problem. One, they have a financial crisis. Smotrich, you remember the first day of the war, he warned the BA, if it transfer any money to the Gaza, they will be punished. Israel till now, they deduct the tax reconciliation, which composed some 40 to 50% of the total BA budget from the tax reconciliation, according to the Paris Protocol between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And also agreement. Second, Palestinian Authority has no election since now 2005. All our political system have been expired. The last election happened in Palestine in 2005. I was a candidate in Palestine in the first election in 1996, but I was too young to win. But I wanted to be part of building my country. Third, Palestinian Authority is too weak to propose ideas. So they become unable to propose ideas, fearing from the different pressure here and there. And some of the Palestinian leadership or figure in the PA want Hamas to come on its knees. This will not happen. I said this in America. I said this in April. I said everywhere. We want Hamas to stay there, not as a military movement. We want Hamas as a political movement to be part of the Palestinian political system. So if you ask me, Brian and others, we have the recipe. We have as a Palestinian civil society, a Palestinian active, we have the recipe. We want Netanyahu must talk to the people and look for the bigger picture, but he wants to more killing. 40,000 orphans in Gaza, 40,000 orphans in Gaza who lost their parents, 20,000 women who become widow. What do you expect from these people to be in the future? They have nothing and they cannot move. By the end of the way, they cannot move to Europe. They are not educated. They don't have money. They don't have any financial issues to move. So they will stay with Gaza. So this war creating the enemy of the future. And the Israeli public, the Israeli people should understand that. We are not happy. We were not happy at all with 7th of October. Nobody was asked of the 7th of October. I keep saying this. When Bin Laden, sorry, Brian, when Bin Laden did what he did in New York in 2001, I was in America, first time I ever, in May 2001. He said, I did this for the Palestinian. Who gave him this authorization?
Yeah. So people
Nobody.
use,
Nobody.
people often
But
use your,
people continue to judge us through him. No. We
so
need to separate between the majority who are interested in till now in the war after 20 months. Of course, the Palestinians blame Israeli for what's happening because the Israeli army in Gaza is doing something beyond any description. And as Nimrod said, an Israeli, which I respect, an Israeli person, I respect this very much. What is the relation between killing children and preventing milk to children? I don't know how to say it in English. All the adult girls, they don't have cotton to deal with their own things now in Gaza. Can you imagine that? All the pregnant women, many of them, they lose their babies because there is no medical treatment. There are 12,000 injuries who are waiting to be removed, medically referred to Egypt or other areas because Gaza has very poor health structure, and many of them were destroyed. Many of the good doctors, if you look, listen, if you look how many journalists were killed, how many professors in universities, how many civil society, how many women, how many activists, how many talented people. Despite all that, I shared with you last week, Brian, and you and Nimrod, there are people who are teaching music in Gaza under the war. I am working with 10 people in Gaza and human rights, and still people want to live in peace. So we should give voice to these people.
Yeah, people want to go back to some normalcy. Now, before I go to Nimrod, I'm going to ask you about how we break this deadlock and some of the ideas we've discussed also about the regional powers and their voice in this. But let me ask you one more thing, Omar, and it's come up in the Q&A, and you mentioned Hamas there briefly as well. What do you say to those who essentially say Hamas is this terrorist organization that not only conducted October 7th, but is committed to the destruction of Israel, and yet it's part of the society over there? How do we explain this to people who try to understand what's going on inside of Gaza and what role that organization might play in the society there?
Two statements, very short. Hamas presented this political document in 2017 where they changed the charter. When Hamas become in power, they changed and they made a dramatical change. I was in Gaza, I met with everybody. So when we were talking to them, trying to educate them, they said the international community did not reward us for what we have been doing. We should help them to change, not because we love them, but because we want them to change and we want them to be the train. If you drop them out of the process, they will be against you. This why the day after should they bring them in through a process of reorientation, through a process of requalification, like what happened in Afghanistan, like what happened in Croatia, like what happened in Somalia, in many other countries. You cannot delete them. Now, there are differences between Hamas inside Gaza, which the military and the public servant, and those who are in Doha and those who are in Beirut. Of course, it's a movement, but it was hit a lot by what happened in Gaza. And Hamas was supposed to make the election for its political bureau in 2024. They didn't do it because of the war. They will do it later. And what I know, I put in a policy paper I published, they want to make a political party like what has in Turkey and in Tunisia. And Hamas becomes a movement that's subjected to the external influence. And if there's a time, I can tell you about Iran, about Turkey, about Qatar, about Egypt, and each country has different priority where they want Hamas to go. So if we want to influence Hamas, we need to talk to those countries who have some influence on them.
Your position is it's a movement that's here to stay. It's been there for a while, but that it can be shaped, especially by regional actors. Let me turn to Nimrod on that regional component. It's something we've talked about literally for years. And we here at the Middle East Institute have deep, longstanding ties with countries across the region and enjoy conversations that are open like this, but also conversations of confidence about the key issues, not just Iran, but also the question of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Nimrod, when you described Israeli politics as you see it and where it is, we haven't gotten to the U.S. here as well. What role do you think key countries in the Arab world might play? What do you see coming out of countries like Saudi Arabia or the UAE, for instance? Lana Nusseibeh had a pretty strong op-ed in the Financial Times in recent weeks. What do you see, and it's been several months since March when the Arab Plan was issued in Cairo about the commitments that were placed on the table to help rebuild Gaza. What's your take on all of that and the possibilities to break this deadlock through a regional component?
With your permission, just one brief comment on what Omar said about Hamas. And finally, I find myself in disagreement with him.
Good.
Hamas is a terrorist organization, and until the terrorist organization changes its character, not because Turkey or Qatar or anybody else puts the pressure on it, but because its leadership wakes up to the reality of a different Middle East, the one that is being driven by young leaders like the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, MBS, and MBZ, and others who want stability and want prosperity. Until those leaders do the change, they should not be interlocutors for anything. I have no expectations of Hamas until they prove us all wrong, and not just issue a document in 2017 that says something, but rather change course. Accept the premise that the future of Israelis and Palestinians is in a two-state solution, negotiated two-state solution. Until they do that, they are irrelevant. Now on the regionals. Look, I've been involved with various groups that have been working on Gaza the morning after, virtually from day one after October 7th. We all realize that however long the war, and nobody anticipated the war of 21 months and still going, however long it is, somebody should have the time and bandwidth to think about the morning after. And I was involved in various groups involving regionals and others, and of course Palestinians. And what I can tell you is that there are variations between the concept that they developed, but not on the principle. The government principle, in the end, anybody who sits down and looks at the situation and says, how do we go from here to there, comes up with similar formulas. And the basic components are that you need two processes reinforcing each other. One process in Gaza and the other one on the West Bank. The process in Gaza is there are 5 Arab countries who have conveyed to the Biden administration and since then to the Trump administration that they are willing to take responsibility to Gaza, troops on the ground, boots on the ground included. However, they have several conditions. One condition, obviously, is ceasefire. Second condition, obviously, IDF out. And they are willing to coordinate with the IDF. What does Israel's right of self-defense looks like when they run the strip? How to coordinate real-time communication, deconfliction, and everything else that goes into it. NDDR for Gaza. The second condition is they're not willing to come into Gaza as occupiers. They want to come into Gaza to help the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, which is the Palestinian Authority. So they need the sponsorship, the invitation from the Palestinian Authority. And next, they're not willing to see their billions of dollars investment in Gaza rehabilitation and reconstruction go up in flames of another round between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, nobody can issue an insurance policy that that's not going to happen, but you can reduce the prospect of that happening by a viable political process. They want Israel to commit to a credible political horizon and behave accordingly. If those conditions are met, you have a situation that Gaza's current situation is resolved, that Arab countries that are hostile to Hamas, in some of them it's outlawed, in the others it's just being chased, are going to take over the strip, that their intelligence community concluded that Hamas is weakened enough and totally dependent on them as to not dare open fire on their people once they enter the Strip. And if you go from there, you can go to the Trump vision initiated by Biden again of broadening the Abraham Accords or creating an alternative path for Israeli-Saudi normalization once Israel accepts the PA as a real partner and allows it to do the sponsorship of Gaza, and once Israel commits to a two-state solution, to a path to a Palestinian state. The second track, I forgot the second track. It has to do with everything and it has to do with everything that Omar said about the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority today, and I think Omar was generous in his description of the Palestinian Authority. It is totally corrupt, incompetent, nepotism, authoritarianism, detached from its people, and therefore must undergo serious reforms. Those reforms require support from the regionals that we spoke about. But first and foremost, Israel has to provide the PA with space to undergo these reforms. And Omar mentioned that our Minister of Finance is out to choke the Palestinian Authority financially to bring about its collapse. So suddenly you see that all the pieces of the puzzle are related. The regionals have a major role to play in doing Gaza, in doing the West Bank, and the last one that I haven't mentioned yet. The regionals, for some reason, have not realized how much leverage they have with the Israeli public.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can convince the Israeli public of the willingness of Saudi Arabia to normalize relations and of the conditions for doing so better than the leaders who can do it.
Yeah.
So can you imagine if the Arab leaders of those 5 Arab countries were to conduct a media campaign vis-a-vis the Israeli public? You can create a Sadat moment without resurrecting Sadat and without going to Jerusalem.
Yes.
You can do a Sadat moment if MBS were to invite an Israeli TV crew to Riyadh, sit down with them for an hour and a half, and tell the Israeli audience straight in their living room, here is what we're willing to do. Here is where your current violent trajectory is leading. And here is what you Israelis have to do for us to be willing to hug you and to go out in public with you.
So that, that would be the big idea. I was noting Omar nodding his head, I think in agreement, but I want to turn back to him to see, well, first of all, there's been some ideas and maybe even on billboards in your neck of the woods, Nimrod, about a Abrahamic shield. And this was discussed in a speech that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave about a year ago. A lot of people have forgotten about here to the US Congress. My take is that none of these ideas will come to fruition without some clear pathway to a two-state solution. I think both of you are in that camp. Is that correct? Omar, you agree with that as well. It's sometimes not a popular position because it's seen as too old hat and stuck in the past. But what both of you are essentially saying is that's a key part of the formula to unlock the support that regional actors, and it's genuine support, that's your assessment, that a lot of these countries, it's not just lip service or empty talk, as they say, that they'd be willing to actually put their money and skin in the game. Is that correct, Omar and Nimrod?
Omar, will you allow me one sentence on this issue? For me, the two-state solution is not a vision, not only a vision or a desired outcome. For me, it is inevitable. With 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, these two people are not going to live happily after when the Palestinians are deprived of equal rights, and we Israelis are not going to give them equal rights and become a minority in our own country. So if we are not granting them equal rights, and if they are not going to roll over and play dead, these two people will bleed each other to separation. And therefore, the objective is to have leaders that prevent that bloodbath and bring us to that inevitable separation before we butcher each other.
Yeah. So, Omar, agree or disagree on everything that Nimrod just said? And I know we're running short on time. I have one or two more questions I want to ask based on what we're seeing from the audience. Go ahead, Omar.
We have no other option apart from the third solution, but this sort of solution should have a different model. Like the place is too small to separate totally. We have joined everything: water, electricity, aviation, economy. So we have an open border. I propose an example of the EU, where France and Germany are part of the big home while they are keeping their specialty. We can work together. I met Nimrod before, and he has a clear idea about what we need now in the Middle East. So two-state solution with different modality. Second, I published a paper last week. I shared with you that the Gulf state become more closer to the Palestinian. Before the war, the Gulf state were dealing with us emotionally, sending some money, but they keep far away. Now, MBS is able to do something, but he need to believe that Netanyahu and the Israeli leadership want to do something. So we are the Palestinian now become part of the comprehensive regional plan. So we need to talk, we need to think about a peace plan with regional, about normalization, Abraham Accord. This is going to happen. We as a Palestinian, I accuse my leadership that when they did not join it, they lost. We should not lose. We should not make other mistake. We cannot prevent Saudi and Emirates and Arab countries to make normalization, but we need to think how to be part of it and how to benefit of it. The problem between the leadership and even in America, they don't talk to the people. They talk to the leadership. I was in the Gulf. I don't want to mention the name, 2 months ago, and people from Saudi and from Oman, they were shocked by listening to people like me, as if I am coming from the sky. So two-state solution. And I will refer to some study that was done by some American and international NGOs. If there is a peace in Israel and Palestine, our economy will be triple. The Israeli economy will be 10 times. And we can make this area one of the most prosperous area in the world. As the Israeli, we are educated people. People need to understand that Gaza, illiteracy rate is Gaza is 1%. Let's finish with this. Before the war, I was working in Gaza, working with young people till now. There were 16,000 IT specialists from Gaza, working with the Gulf, working with Google and Bill Gates from Gaza. Each one was making $3,000. And some of them, they were working with some Israeli company through Ramallah-based companies. So there is opportunity. And we have gas in the Mediterranean, and we are connecting between Asia and Africa. We have tried all the bad things. Siege, blockade, cut water, occupation, look to the West Bank. But we never try the one thing, which is making peace. We need to invest in peace much more than invest in war and other things, because war will never solve the problem. And even if 500,000 Palestinians leave Gaza, still there will be 1.5 million Palestinians. In Cairo, like me, there are 120,000 Palestinians who exit Gaza by the war. 2/3 of them, they want to go back. Myself, I will go back immediately if the crossing open, because people want me and I want to be, I want to see my kids, my sister, my families. I want to be part of building Gaza. So the recipe is there, the idea is there, but we need to think about big picture. And of course, it's normal to disagree with Nimrod, but I like to talk to those who disagree with me.
Yes.
There is no point to speak to my wife or to my brother. I'm ready to go wherever. I was addressing the Jewish community in America a couple of years ago. I have no problem, because we need to talk to those who disagree with us to reach a conclusion. Because at the end of the day, I believe Nimrod and his son and his grandson want to live in peace, like my grandson and my 2 sons who live in France, and they never be back to Gaza for the past 10, 15 years.
So Omar, I think you just broke some news there that your wife agrees with you, and I'm glad you have a wife that agrees with you.
All the time.
God bless. So we only have 5 minutes left, and I'm sorry our time is so short. And I have some ideas about how we might reformat rich discussions like this. There's a lot that's in here. I did want to ask, and maybe just a minute or two response from each of you, a question about U.S. policy, because we at the Middle East Institute are committed to also trying to shape the U.S. policy discourse. Over to you, Nimrod, on how you perceive the Trump administration's approach. You said a lot about what the region could do. You had a lot of your own views on the current Israeli government. What's your take? And I say this as a guy who I write a quarterly report card of the Trump administration or U.S. administrations, and the next one's coming out next week. I give them a grade on these things. So I'm really curious to hear what you say in the next minute or two about how you see the Trump administration handling this file.
I must say that I'm quite astonished. President Trump has so much going for him in this country. I don't think there's any other country in the world where Trump is as popular as in Israel.
Yeah.
And that was the case before he joined us in doing Iran, let alone since. And here we have a situation, and I'll take just two examples. He imposes a ceasefire in January, a plan that was really initiated by Netanyahu a year before, but he dragged his feet until Trump slammed his fist at the table, and he went for it. And then Netanyahu violates the same deal that Trump put his name to it with no consequences. That's the education of a friend. You can do whatever you want. Now, last week, the prime minister goes to Washington. The president wants a ceasefire, comes out in public and says, I want this war to end. And the prime minister explains to him his political considerations and complexities and constraints, and goes home with a free hand to do as he wishes, which brings to mind a previous U.S. Secretary of State. To him, a previous Israeli prime minister said, look, I can't do it because I have problems at home with my coalition and opposition and party. And the Secretary of State said, I don't work for you, sir. I work for the President of the United States. If you have a problem at home, go home, fix your problem, you know what is required, and call me when it's done. And I can't believe that this administration that has an agenda for the region, which is business, prosperity, transactional deals all over the place, peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and so on, is not using the leverage available to it in order to get things done, given that this prime minister has proven that when the president wants it, it happens.
Yeah, so we're really running short on time. Omar, a brief response on your perspective on Trump, and then I'll have to conclude, unfortunately, because this is a very rich discussion. How do you see the Trump administration?
Two statement. The Palestinians were very frustrated by Biden administration because they didn't do anything, and even they provide Israel with a lot of money and a lot of weapons. Many Palestinians were happy that Trump came over because we knew that Trump is a decision maker and he's strong and he might do something. And we still believe he can do something and he can bring peace and he can put the pressure on Netanyahu to stop the war. And I will be more than happy myself and another 10,000 Palestinians to nominate him for Nobel Prize if he can do it today, not tomorrow.
Thanks, Omar. Just maybe three brief points to conclude. One, I'm going to propose to my colleagues here at MEI that we should actually have a new process where we take a lot of these very rich points and insights that come in on the Q&A and burden you and me and others to try to actually respond to them if we run out of time, afterwards and put it up. But maybe that creates more work for all of us, because there really were great questions about the short term. What we wanted to do, and you guys helped me do this, is move a little bit toward medium and longer term. And I think that's the second point, is that a real challenge with all of this, it's like this very complicated Rubik's Cube, if you know, all these different variables inside of Palestinian society and politics, inside of Israeli society. And then the regional scenario is to align all of these together and build that bridge between this current awful moment and towards these longer term visions that you've talked about and we've all talked about. But then third, just to thank you both. I know it's a little bit later in your time zone, and thanks for all those who were joining us, for sharing your insights with us. I hope it's the first of many more conversations, because the point of doing this is to try to remember that there are very important questions, like the question of the war in Gaza, even while all of us are consumed with giving our hot take on events that may have happened 2 or 3 hours ago and trying to give some insight there. These ideas, which seem a little out of reach, but not out of sight, about what a long-term vision might look like, I think are essential, and that we need to do more as think tanks and as analysts to put the spotlight on the work that you're doing. So thanks for spending your time with us for an hour today, and hopefully we'll have many more discussions like this. I'm Brian Katulis signing off.